In this video, we will go over how we define the hypotheses for a hypothesis test. As mentioned in the previous video, there are actually two hypotheses. There is what we call the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis is often the statement that is being investigated. For that reason, sometimes it is called the research hypothesis. And we'll do an example here shortly, but this might be an instance where, hey, we think the proportion of people in favor of this policy has increased, or we think the average age has changed. So that is what is being researched, and that is often going to take the position of the alternative hypothesis. But that hypothesis would need to have something to compare to, some sort of contrast, and that is what is in the null hypothesis. So if you are researching that the proportion of people in favor of a policy has increased, then you must have some sort of baseline that you're basing that increase off of. So that is what's in the null hypothesis. It is like the baseline. It's something that maybe is currently believed to be true, and you want to see if there's been some change or increase or decrease. So I like to think of it as a baseline. Maybe status quo appeals to you, or no change is useful as well. And we like to abbreviate these hypotheses, right? This is a lot to write every time. The alternative hypothesis is shorthanded with HA or H1. You'll see both of those in the homework. The null hypothesis is denoted for shorthand H0. Let's look at a couple mini examples of how we format these hypotheses, and we'll use the notation as well. So these come in a few different flavors. Here's the first example, HO, H1. My first example will be appealing to what is sometimes considered the average human internal body temperature. Do you remember the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit that if you're a healthy adult, that's like the presumed internal temperature? 98.6, right? So in the null hypothesis, I might say that the average temperature is 98.6 degrees. But I believe there's been some hoopla that perhaps this has increased from 98.6 degrees. So I might represent that in the alternative hypothesis with this statement that maybe the mean internal body temperature has increased, is greater than 98.6 degrees. We write a number down. That number is that baseline number. In the null hypothesis, that is like the presumed status quo baseline, and it's always got an equals. The alternative is usually the statement we are researching. So that's a particular way that we can create a null and alternative hypothesis, but there is another way that this could have gone down. I'm going to use the same scenario here with the body temperature, but instead, what if you don't think that necessarily there's an increase, but maybe you think the body temperature has decreased on average for healthy humans? So you might actually write a less than symbol right there. That would be another way to structure a alternative hypothesis. But wait, there's more. I'm going to use a different parameter this time because we're mostly going to look at the proportion. And maybe you think that the current proportion of males in a population is a half, or females is a half. Or maybe you think the proportion of males in a population has changed. Not necessarily an increase or necessarily a decrease, but here this would be you're investigating for a change. These are 3 different versions of a hypothesis test. You would not do all 3 at once. I'm here illustrating these different alternative hypothesis structure. They have names. The one on the top here is called a right-tailed alternative hypothesis because we're looking for an increase, or that is pointing to the right. Can you guess what this one is called? You got it. That's a left-tailed alternative hypothesis. And the third one down here is not pointing necessarily to the left or to the right, but you're looking for a change which can occur as an increase or a decrease. So this is called a two-tailed alternative hypothesis. The left and right-tailed ones are considered directional. That's another term. So directional refers to either left or right-tailed, but saying left or saying right is a little more descriptive. A two-tailed test is not directional. The alternative hypothesis either has a not equal to symbol, a greater than, or a less than symbol. The null hypothesis always has an equal sign. HO, always with an equal sign. And there's a number that is written here, and that number gets written the same for both the HO and the H1. That's going to conclude this video about the structure of a null and alternative hypothesis. And in the next video, we'll look at the next step.